Hello lovelies, today we're going to be taking a look at the Robotech role-playing game. Not the Palladium one, the one by Strange Machine Games, so the more modern, newer one. Somehow they managed to wangle the license, probably due to Palladium screwing up epically on various things. And this is a very, very different game to the Palladium Robotech RPG. I mean, it's a complete game for a start. So let's get into it. But, you know, having so relatively recently talked about Robotech in the context of the Palladium RPG, I don't really want to repeat myself too much. So this review will likely be shorter than usual unless I ramble on a bit too much. If you want to learn about my background and relationship to Robotech, which was pretty rare for someone in the UK, I would say, then go and check out that video. Just scroll back a bit, you should be able to find it easy enough. So, this is not a slim, black and white, somewhat cheaply printed effort like most of Palladium's efforts over the years. This is a full colour hardback. I believe it was kickstarted. I missed the Kickstarter for their Invid Invasion supplement, but this book covers the first series and a bit of the second series and a fragment of the third series. So this is a bit of everything, really, but most completely it's about the first series. The less said about the second series, the better, I think. That was definitely the weakest of the three. Myself, I'm more of an Invid Invasion fanatic. Unfortunately, I missed out on backing the Kickstarter for the, I think it's called the Homefront source book, which includes the Invid Invasion. So I'll have to wait for that to come out conventionally to buy it. As I say, this is very different to the Palladium game books. The Palladium system is cumbersome and kind of dumb, and when you get into mech combat particularly, I have found in Palladium's games, it takes a very long time to get through even a basic combat, even just like one mecha against another. It's like a pair of washing machines hitting each other with a stick. It doesn't capture the dynamism of anime mech combat. Comparisons are inevitable, so I'm going to be mentioning Palladium a lot, unfortunately. The Palladium books were a little bit scant on background, I think just due to the different design assumptions back then, and that, you know, you'd have watched the series and you had knowledge and that you were working off that, and that all you really needed was the game system. This is a much more complete book. So you get all the background, you get all the information that you might need. However, it is also a more narrative based system, much more of a narrative based system. So you don't get the satisfying level of crunch and the kind of statistics and details on all the mecha and hardware and so on that you would have gotten in the Palladium books or in any of the various companion books to the series that came out. So instead, this focuses far more on narrative-driven combat scenes, drama between characters. Yeah, it's a soap opera with mecha, which, yeah, to be fair enough, that's what Robotech always was, to a huge extent. Characters are primarily defined by their skills. There aren't really any statistics to speak of. You also get what's called an element, as in my element, which describes a fairly broad set of circumstances in which you operate the best. And then if you're operating outside of your element, you probably take a slight bit of a penalty. You also get proficiencies that give you the capability to use certain things. I've never been a huge fan of proficiencies because they cross over a bit too much with skill for me. Maybe think of them more as licenses to get around that to one extent or another. Besides that, you can take a certain amount of damage, though most combat is going to be in mecha. You have talents, which are a bit more like feats or whatever. Those allow you to customize your character in the way that stats probably would in a more conventional game. So they allow you to focus and express particular capabilities of your characters. You have burnout, which is the maximum number of dice you can use, excluding equipment, in actions without suffering stress. Stress is either fatigue or drama, and that builds up as you go along. So drama is those soap opera moments. Fatigue is war weariness. So it's soap opera, war story, and that is reflected within the rules. Characters don't get a huge amount of mechanical description. It is really just limited to your skills and your talents, proficiencies. Yeah. So it can be difficult to differentiate between characters to a satisfying degree, but if you have a talented games master who can come up with additional talents and so on for you, and if you're creative in your use of your element, I think you can get around that. So dramas are generally ongoing things that you can resolve potentially, or that you can indulge in order to power what are called heroic moves. Heroic moves break the normal rules and allow you to do certain things, like if you evoke an heroic move to escape from a Zentradi ace, for example, that's a heroic move. That allows you to automatically retreat from the combat for whatever reason suited to your heroic move. You can also take on new drama in order to pull off heroic moves. Normally you can only use like one heroic move in an encounter in a session. So in that case, that Zentradi ace maybe now has a vendetta against you, and then that becomes drama. And the way to resolve that would be to beat that ace in combat. But meanwhile, they might be turning up in every combat encounter trying to kill your character and focusing every effort on that rather than acting tactically towards the other players. So that might place your character at greater risk. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So challenges, what we would normally call like skill rolls or whatever in the game, there you build a dice pool, so you can put two things into your dice pool plus an equipment suite or a situational benefit if such a thing exists. So if you were trying to get away from some battle pods in a canyon, for example, you might use your, piloting skill. Let's find some actual examples. Where's skills? Skills and talents. Page 58. Oh, I was already there. Isn't that great? Oh, I can't be bothered looking. All right, so maybe you have an ace pilot skill. Maybe you have a crazy maneuvers skill. Skills are a bit... they kind of cross over with talents. And they're quite descriptively named, for example. And so you add those together. Oh, that can give you 6 dice, but if you roll more than 5 dice, perhaps, then you're going to get stress, but you really want to lose these guys. So you take the stress point in either drama or fatigue. Call it fatigue because you're being pursued and chased. And maybe you've got boosters on your Veritech, so you decide to kick those in, so you get an equipment bonus. Equipment dice don't count towards your burnout, so yeah, you're not taking any extra stress or anything from that. Maybe that gives you another 2 dice, so 3 plus 3 plus 2, the 8d6. Hypothetically, I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass there, right? Then you roll a number of d6s equal to that skill total. So in our example, all right, we're looking at 8d6. So we would roll those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we take our d6s and we roll. And I think it's 5s or 6s are successes, so we get none there. But if you have some sort of edge or something, then 4, 5s, or 6s count as successes. And so it goes, right? You can partially succeed on something, which allows you to try again, perhaps with a bonus, or a reduced target number of successes, or things may be more complicated, more difficult. In combat, you're trying to accrue successes against the enemy while they're trying to accrue successes against you, and it's all fairly vague, but the turn order, particularly in combat, is quite static. You communicate. I forget the exact examples of the phases, but there are basically 3 phases for each side in combat. Now, as an officer or something, if you're not playing on the front line, you can do things like lend dice to other characters or command a unit of NPC mecha to perform in a certain way, and so you're building the dice pool for them in the combat. So it's all a bit vague, hand-wavy, narrative focused. I don't really know how I feel about it, because on the one hand, right, it does definitely mostly replicate that feel of the series, the soap opera with mecha, right, and the interpersonal drama. It's like you're simultaneously fighting battle pods and worrying about which girl you're going to take to prom, sort of thing. You know, it has all that going on, and that is reflected in the way the game runs. So it encourages you to indulge in the drama, and that can have an effect on the game itself, whether it's you pulling off heroic moves or so on, or there is an optional rule that the more drama you have in your life, the more important you are to the story, and so the harder you are to kill. So there are those sort of narrative interplay moments, which is things I've thought about including in certain games of my own. Like, I hate football, soccer to anyone else, but I've often thought about doing a kind of narrative drama football RPG where the drama and nonsense that happens off the field has an effect on what happens on the field. And in a way, this is similar to those sorts of ideas that I've had. And you can see that the statistics on the various mecha and so on, they aren't particularly in depth. Like, you're not getting model numbers of atomic drives or whatever else that's going on. Rather, you have required rank, what the designation is, general stats like armor, structure, how many hardware points it has for mounts, speed, and its basic loadout, which isn't really much. So if you're a gearhead, you're not going to find this particularly satisfying, even though equipment is really important in terms of building your dice pools. It does cover all the mecha from the series, and a bit more besides, things that only appear fleetingly, perhaps. It does include Destroids, which were actually always more my favourite than the actual Veritex. And it does cover some of the equipment and gear from the second series, like the Centaur tanks and so on. But again, the less said about Series 2, the better. If you want to watch Robotech, I believe it's currently on Amazon's sub-anime channel. I think you can stream it there. I didn't check whether you could in the UK, but I think you can in the US. What do we think then overall? It's a weird one. It's an odd duck. I do think it's better than Palladium's efforts. The artwork is slightly off from the anime style, which is a touch disconcerting. The layout is fine, but it's a bit crowded, and when it's explaining rules, it does tend to kind of bleed together a bit and feel like it's trying to hit you with too much all at the same time. It does include a whole bunch of adventures, which as usual feels like a bit of a waste of space to me. It would have been better to have more of an episode guide coupled with a description perhaps of how aspects of those episodes could play out in terms of the game rules. But it is better than Palladium, and if you do want that more kind of drama, soap opera oriented sort of style of game, this is definitely much better for that. But it just feels a little bit too rules light, and like a lot of narrative games, what starts out rules light ends up choked in examples and very specific order of play and so on, and it ends up not being as freewheeling as it intends to be. You know, this is more narrative light than Fate, for example, in a lot of ways, but then also more complex than Fate in a lot of ways. And I do really resent having all of these example scenarios, because for me it's just such a colossal waste of money. All right. Let's think about things here then. In terms of style, it is slightly off from a pure anime style. Unfortunately, I think I would have preferred like cel-shaded images and so on. The print is also... excuse me. The print is also a little bit dark. It's not high contrast enough. The darker colours tend to bleed into one another. I don't know who they used for printing, but that's whoever that printer's fault is. The writing is okay. It's a bit bloated in some places and a bit overwhelming in others. As a stylistic choice, a more narrative frame for a space opera, the emphasis on the opera, you know, the system definitely supports that style of play, and that is a bit more characteristic of the series than Palladium's effort was. So overall, it's a low 4 for style, I think. In terms of substance, it is a more complete game. It does more completely describe the background, right? So the Palladium book assumes that you've watched the series with the intensity of a 14-year-old autistic. This doesn't, you know, it does handhold you through some of the background, some of the ideas, some of the concepts, some of the major plot points and so on. And in terms of material, you know, weapons, vehicles, options, yeah, this is also much more complete in one book. So that's laudable as well. but it does lack that fine granular detail that a lot of mech heads really like. So low 4 as well there. So that's actually turns out being 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5, which makes it a recommendation. However, I will say that the sheer amount of narrative focus, if you're not into that kind of game, then this isn't going to be for you. If you're okay with that and you're into the drama and you don't need a lot of fine granular mechanics, then fantastic. Otherwise, it's not gonna be for you at all. I think this is a Marmite game. Either you're really gonna like it or you're not. The score doesn't really reflect my ambivalence as to how this would actually work out in play, but I do appreciate it as a product compared to the Palladium product. Zang.
Dai Kaiju Dai is a game about beating up monsters in giant mecha. The players take the part of mecha pilots and their support crew, using the fate system to allow the one to influence the other. They will fight giant monsters and walk in their shadow. They will establish rivalries and defeat villains. They will uncover conspiracies and lead the fight back against what seems to be a world itself in rebellion against humanity. Mostly, though, they'll smash giant monsters to pieces in epic, destructive fights. Available from post-mort.com, lulu.com, and DriveThruRPG.
Down before your eyes. The actors screaming agonizing cries. Another useless reason to despise. The secret life that everyone denies. That secret life that everyone denies. That secret life that everyone denies. You're a star now. You go far now. In the Nero Daughter Show. In the Nero Daughter Show. You're on stage now. Disengage now. In the Nero Daughter Show. In the Nero Daughter Show. Nero Daughter Show.